Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Umineko and They Cry, episode 13. Last episode, we unfortunately lost 6 members of this family, and Kinzo is also nowhere to be found. Um, oh, yeah, this is a double upload, by the way, because, I just couldn't leave this alone. It's getting good, and once a week is not cutting it. So, I really don't have much else to say besides let's get into this. No one had seen Kinzo since the discovery of those 6 terrible corpses. On top of that, the phones were broken, the radio wouldn't reach anyone, and there was no way to contact the police. So we're screwed, basically. Well, not we, but yes. Apparently, the typhoon would leave tomorrow and a boat would come. But until then, no one could rely on anyone outside the island, nor could they escape the island. The tragedy had hit everyone so abruptly that they'd lost all their composure. Everyone felt a heavy silence. Everyone was impatient. Even though they needed to do something, they couldn't think of anything. So some of them held their heads in their arms while others got irritated. Right now, no one could explain what was occurring on this island, Rokinjima. People are dying? That's what's happening. Duh. I'm sorry. After that, we ate the breakfast Kumasawa-san had made, which felt dry and tasteless. Leave the poor lady alone. Oh my god. Of, of course, this was right after something like that had happened. No one felt particularly hungry. However, we understood logically that not eating would weaken our bodies. And one day, not by that much. I think you'd live if you skipped breakfast. I'm sorry, that just sounds like I didn't have breakfast this morning and I'm fine. I'm not withering away. My muscles aren't atrophying. It would also be rude to Kumasawa-san, who had made the breakfast. Kumasawa-san had taken some unusual Western vegetables, one that Goda-san had probably ordered for his ultra-elaborate meals, and cooked them in a Japanese style, which made them turn an unpleasant color. God, what did she do to them? As to what Goda-san had been planning to cook with those ingredients, we don't know. We're not professional chefs. Right then, I couldn't even imagine it. If I did think about it, I'd be reminded of the way Goda-san died, and a sour taste would fill the inside of my mouth. Everyone pretended to eat for the time being, but of course, no one made much progress. Then, we began pooling our knowledge of our current situation. First off, 6 people, which included Uncle Kraus, my dad, Kiri-san, Aunt Rosa, Goda-san, and Shannon-chan, had been found in the Rose Garden storehouse as brutally mutilated corpses. And yet, we couldn't contact the police, since both the phones and the radio were unusable. So until the typhoon passed, there was nothing we could do. Furthermore, grandfather, who we might have hoped would be able to show a little leadership in this kind of situation, had disappeared some time ago. Goda-san hadn't made breakfast, so grandfather's stomach must have been empty. And if he had just been taking a casual walk, we should have been able to hear him whining about how hungry he was by now. How old is Kinzo? Bro is too old to be doing all that. And despite that, he hadn't appeared. There was more than a small chance that he'd gotten caught up in this crime. According to my aunts, on their way back from Kinzo's study, they'd searched for him, calling out on every floor, but were unable to find him. Considering the timing of it all, it's only reasonable to assume that his disappearance had something to do with the crime. We figured Dad and the rest were probably killed in the dining hall and then painstakingly moved to the storehouse. So maybe grandfather has already been killed and dragged to some strange place which we simply haven't discovered yet. No one actually said it out loud, but this theory seemed extremely convincing. We will go check that all of the windows and doors are locked. We must also conduct a thorough search for father. The children must remain in this room. Eva-san and Hideyoshi-san, I'm sorry, but please stay here with the children. I'd like to ask you the same, Dr. Nanja. I understand. I will wait here. Aunt Natsu followed the servants, Genji-san, Kumasawa-san, and Ken-kun out of the parlor. All that was left was Aunt Eva, Uncle Hideyoshi, Dr. Nanjo, and the 4 of us children. A total of 7 people. Let's all stick together and maybe watch some television while we wait. Though I doubt we'll find anything good in the middle of the day on a Sunday. Isn't that like prime TV time? I don't know, I haven't had cable in so long. Uncle Hideyoshi started acting cheerfully, trying to brighten up this gloomy atmosphere. Good show, watch it, watch it! Oh, really? You want to watch TV, Maria-chan? Then come and watch it with your uncle. Maria was the only one who joined in. Even though Maria had been told of her mother's death, she didn't show the slightest flicker in her emotions. Was it really normal for a 9-year-old girl like Maria to act so much like a very young child? Everyone else's mood failed to improve, and they each sank absent-mindedly into their sofas. Aniki, can I ask you something? What is it? Just now, in the storehouse, you said something about Shannon-chan and the ring. Did you give that to her? George Aniki didn't answer, but he hung his head and closed both of his eyes. There could be no clearer response. Quit it, Battler. Figure it out yourself. You're right. I shouldn't have asked. Bro, Battler's actually, like, gaining common situational awareness? That's right. It was me. Last night, I proposed to her. That was when I gave her the ring. I told her that tomorrow she should put it on whatever finger she wanted as her answer. I guess it was a pretty pretentious thing to say. And that ring had been on the ring finger of Shannon-chan's left hand. Well, several years ago, Shannon-chan came to me asking for advice about you, George Nissan. I wonder what she could have said. Shannon was always really bad at lying. It's obvious pretty quickly that you were the one she was talking about. She asked whether it'd be okay for her to get close to someone, even though she was only a servant. She asked about what kinds of things boys like, what kind of clothes she should wear to make them happy. Lots of stuff like that. I guess you could say I felt envious hearing her say that. So then she was given an engagement ring and it all ended right there. Different people value things differently. But being proposed to by a man, well, be the highest point of your life. So I'm sure last night, I'm sure Shannon was happy. From the bottom of her heart. Happier than she's ever been since the day of her birth. Hmm. George Aniki sighed deeply, without raising his head. Or maybe tears had risen to his eyes. It seems Shannon was on duty in the guest house last night. But because she was too embarrassed to go back to the guest house with me, she went over to the mansion. Think about how Shannon must have felt. When you receive an engagement ring, then no matter how much warning you've been given beforehand, it's perfectly normal to get excited that your mind goes blank. She must have been incredibly embarrassed. And then Shannon went to the mansion, even though she hadn't been assigned there. Helped go to Samantha's work, and got caught up in this crime. If only I hadn't given her that ring on that day. In that place, Shannon wouldn't have... Saya wouldn't have been caught up in that crime. Aniki, that's the one place where you're wrong. Definitely wrong. So don't cry anymore. Make me feel bad. Like... Battler-kun, let's leave him be. After Aunt Ava said that, I stopped talking to him. Misplaced words of comfort might actually do more harm than good. Jessica sat down next to Aniki and put an arm around him. Maybe only Jessica, who had known about Aniki and Shannon's love since the beginning, and who had even discussed that relationship with Shannon, could comfort Aniki now. I went over to Aunt Ava and sat down in the opposite sofa. Battler-kun, you really are strong. It looks like you've kept a good hold on yourself. Well, look, the depth of the love becomes the depth of the wounds, right? After all, it's not like how that old bastard died has anything to do with me. Oh, Battler, don't say that. I feel bad about Kiri-san, but, well, she wasn't actually my parent. My. If that's so, you certainly were crying a lot back then. Oh, okay, Kiri, it's been like less than an hour. Can we not? Wait, not Kiri, Ava. Why are we joking around about this right now? Well, I did at least think that much crying was due as a gratitude to the parent that had raised me. The speed of that changeover in that dry tone must have come from Rudolph. That kid would always get violently happy, sad, and angry. But he'd always regain his cool immediately afterwards. It's nothing like that. I haven't really been able to get over the shock yet. I think the only difference between me and everyone else is the kinds of emotions it stirred in me. What do you mean? I've been acting much calmer than George and Iki and Jessica. That wasn't because my sadness was any less intense or because I'd already recovered. My sadness was simply getting replaced gradually with a different emotion. Rather than sad, I'd say I'm more pissed off. What bastard did this and where? It's kind of been eating at me that I didn't get the chance to smack him upside the face. That was what I really wanted to do. I couldn't forgive myself if I just sat there, overwhelmed with sadness and hugging my knees. Since the time Dad and the others were killed, this island has been covered by the typhoon. which means the bastard responsible for this is still somewhere on this island. Yes, that would seem to be the case. I wonder if they're hiding somewhere in that dark forest, even now. I felt like I had a very similar conversation with Kiri-san the night before. That's right. After the letter from the person claiming to be Beatrice appeared at the dinner table last night, we talked about whether or not a 19th person actually exists. Aunt Ava, do you think this murder has anything to do with the letter from Beatrice last night? Ah, that one. Well, I wonder. All of the siblings agreed that the mysterious letter was sent to further complicate the problem of father's inheritance. As to whether that the case this morning are related, it's impossible to tell at this stage. Was that letter really given to Maria by some witch called Beatrice? How could it be? All of it was a farce devised by father, wasn't it? He made Shan or someone wear the dress from the porch that tricked Maria-chan, right? Isn't that just the kind of overly intricate prank father would pull? I don't know now well. Last night I talked with Kiri-san about whether Beatrice actually exists. And Kiri-san also said that Beatrice was probably one of the 18 of us. Isn't that obvious? There's no one on this island besides us, right? Then there must be someone amongst us who's pretending to be Beatrice. There's no one else but us on this island, you think? Obviously, right? Are you saying there could be someone else here other than us? No one is on this island except us. There are only 18 people. So the one pretending to be Beatrice has to be one of those 18. Well, now it's 12 because, six of us are dead and one of us is missing. Kiri-san denied the existence of a 19th person by spinning the chessboard around. Even though Aunt Ava hadn't constructed an argument that complicated, her opinion, at least, was the same. Except, if that's the case, our situation starts to look very ugly. At the time of Beatrice's letter, the whole thing could be passed off as a prank set up by someone or another. However, if we're assuming there's no 19th person, we can't ignore this anymore. In other words, there is no 19th person. Then the culprit who killed Dad and the others is also one of the 18, right? This music is so mischievous. So in other words, the person who killed them is one of the people inside this very mansion right now. Aunt Eva smiled meaningfully. It looked like she thought this conclusion should have been obvious from the very beginning. The culprit carried the bodies of those 6 into the storehouse. But even that was an impressive feat, don't you think? That shutter is always closed and locked, right? In other words, in order to carry them into the storehouse, the culprit would need to unlock the shutter. Understand. Is it possible the shutter was left open by mistake that day? The servant said it's always kept locked. In other words, unless the culprit took the keys from the servant room, there's no way they could have opened the storehouse. I wonder if the key in the servant room was the only one. Genji-san said that was the case. Which means the culprit knew where that single key was kept and took it. Just now, I watched when Kanon-kun return the key to the servant room. The wall was packed with keys, and I don't think a novice would know where or what those keys went to. The culprit was miraculously able to find the storehouse key among all of those. Furthermore, even though the key didn't have a tag or anything sticking to it, they knew it was the key to the storehouse behind the rose garden. And that means they also knew where the storehouse was. I'll say it even clearer. The culprit knew the inside of the servant room well. Her argument was extremely plain and clear. The bodies had been found thrown somewhere in the bushes of the rose garden. There wouldn't have been much to go on. However, if there was only one key to the storehouse in the servant room, and it was stored with such a large group of keys, and novices would not be able to tell them apart, this meant the culprit was someone who went into the servant room a lot and was familiar with the location of the keys. The family members didn't normally go into the servant room, which means that one of the servants is the culprit. I'm sorry, but even I can't tell you any more than that. However, I'll tell you one thing. What's that? It's reasonable to think that the culprits are multiple in number and fairly well armed. They'd have to be, wouldn't they? They had to assault the 4 in the dining hall and kill them, drag a total of 6 bodies all the way to the storehouse beyond the rose garden, and arrange for that disgusting makeup and the graffiti on the shutter. There's no way that a single culprit could carry out all of that on their own, right? It made sense. It probably would have been possible for a single person with enough time, but it would also take so incredibly long. It's probably safe to assume that a significant number of people were involved. Whew. So what you're saying is that maybe all of the servants were in cahoots. Please keep it quiet, okay? It wouldn't be right to voice mere speculation like this. And if it really is true, what would you do next? They might not let us leave here alive. This is an opponent who had no trouble killing Nissan and the 3 others. Right now, the only ones I can count on to fight with me are the 3 in my family, and maybe you, which comes to a total of 4 people. Right? We're no better off than we were last night. In short, it'd be easy for the culprits to massacre the rest of us. I've been playing detective with Aunt Ava, trying to expose the person who had killed Dad and the rest before the police did. If only I could cleverly penetrate the culprit's identity and stick the proof in their face. I've been so sure that, just like in one of those detective movies, the culprit would then give up and surrender. However, the culprit would only surrender if there was no way for them to fight back. The culprits behind the crime on this island were far from helpless, and he might even be able to massacre all of the remaining people here. And on top of that, this island was like a giant closed room, cut off from the outside world by the typhoon. So they had a full day until tomorrow to kill, scheme, and camouflage themselves. In short, it wasn't a safe atmosphere where we could get very far by playing detective. To the contrary, we were at a stage where we had to be scared stiff, since playing detective might displease the culprits and cause them to commit another mass murder. Well, it is just a possibility, right? But I can't bring myself to trust these servants yet. And that doesn't mean I only suspect them. Don't you think there might be some mastermind behind all of this? A mastermind? Why do you say that? It's just a feeling. Think about about what the word servant literally means. It means someone who serves as someone else's arms and legs, right? It was a bunch of Ushimiya family members who got killed. So naturally, there must be someone involved who stands to gain from that result. This is also plain and clear. The Ushimiya family had been right in the middle of discussions about how to distribute the inheritance when grandfather died. If this case followed the standard form of any classic mystery novel, the crime was definitely caused by someone with ties to the Ushimiya family and who was involved in the inheritance problem. Aunt Ava had probably read a few books in that genre herself. Her argument may have had a few blind assumptions in it, but it was a standard conclusion that anyone might have reached. I think most people would end up suspecting the servants, even if they used different reasoning to get there. Especially the story about the key to the shutter. That made it very easy to suspect that one of the servants was involved. And that's why I don't like it. What do you mean you don't like it? Nah, just talking to myself. I tried to dodge her question by joking, but I couldn't erase the sense of unease welling up inside of me. After all, her conclusion was such an easy one to reach. A conclusion that anyone could reach. And I just couldn't be satisfied with that. If I tried spinning the chessboard around like I learned from Kiri-san, this was exactly why a servant couldn't possibly be the culprit. If the servants really were the culprits, they wouldn't hide the bodies in a place connected to themselves. Why on earth would they use the Rose Garden shed if they were the ones in charge of the key that could unlock it? Yeah, and why would, Canon report that? If that, why would it? If the, family never actually goes to the storehouse, then they could just not, they'd never find out. The police would probably immediately pursue whoever had been in control of the key. It was even possible that some other facts might come to light as a result. The more we think of the servants as the culprits, the less reason they had to carry the bodies into the storehouse. But what if they knew we'd think that, and put the corpses in the storehouse for that very reason? No, that's completely impossible. When the police come and inspect the scene of the crime, they'll probably be able to uncover many things. No matter how carefully the culprits carried out that murder, some traces will definitely be found. In other words, they had everything to lose and nothing to gain. If you think about it this way and look at this murder game from the culprit's side, it's hard to imagine why they'd want to call attention to the corpses. Once the corpses were found, it could result in someone sending a report to the police, or it might make the remaining people more cautious, or it might make the survivors start to search for the culprit. None of these things would make life any easier for the culprit. It's just like the words of the main character's mother in a novel I read recently called Higurashi no Nakukoru ni. Where have I heard that before? My god. Yeah, you know what? Actually, I can't even judge because I've done the same thing before in something I've written. I just straight up shouted out one of my own works. So, man, cicadas be crying. What's next? Are there gonna be seagulls crying? Every story needs to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Eliminating that beginning is essential for the perfect crime. Right now, we don't know where grandfather is. We don't know if he's already become a victim or if he's one of the culprits. But this state of confusion must be beneficial to the killer. The culprit has absolutely nothing to gain by showing us the bodies in such an obvious way and making us all realize there's been a murder. In fact, this is the perfect place to spin the chessboard around. In other words, showing us the corpses in such a flashy way must be the culprit's goal in and of itself. So at the very least, to the culprit, the appearance of 6 corpses there meant more than the deaths themselves. In other words, the culprit wanted this murder on display. To whom? To us. This is a message. The culprit's trying to shove something in our faces. I don't know what it is. At this point in time, this vulgar mass murder isn't making me feel anything except a malice directed towards all of us. Malice towards all of us, is it? Each one of the survivors has some kind of connection to one of the 6 victims. Uncle Krause's death brought Jessica the grief of losing a family member. The deaths of Dad and Kiri-san brought me sorrow, while Aunt Rosa's death brought Maria sorrow. Well, debatable. Goda-san's death probably shocked his fellow servants, and Shannon-chan's death brought grief both to George and Iki, who had proposed to her, and Kanon-kun, who had loved her like an older sister. Everyone now on this island has received an equal amount of sadness. Well, Aunt Ava was sure that the servants were in cahoots. But then, how could you explain the deaths of Goda-san and Shannon-chan? At any rate, by this argument, the grief caused by the 6 deaths hit everyone but Ava and Uncle Hideyoshi. Even Aunt Ava, who had directed suspicion at the servants and acted as though she herself was beyond suspicion, could not be ruled out as a suspect. In the first place, she was able to argue that the servants were suspicious by focusing on the shutter's key. But if you look at it from a perspective of motive and who would gain, Aunt Ava's name rises to the top of the list. I know what you're thinking, Battler-kun. Huh? Oh no. Please don't tell anybody about how my head's so full of obscene stuff. I'm the one who's going to gain the most from these murders. Since I'm going to be suspected anyway, I might as well get it out in the open. I tried to dodge the issue by joking around, but apparently it didn't work. The inheritance will be divided into as many parts as there are siblings. But right now, I'm the only one of the 4 left. All of the assets of the Ushimiya family will become mine. If Uncle Hideyoshi heard you, he'd say, "Could you give it a rest? It's not funny." I'm sorry. I was just fooling around since I'm going to be suspected anyway, no matter how much I try to smooth it over. That's why, from my point of view, this murder might have been designed to cast suspicion on me. Unfortunately, my alibi for last night is weak. Could you tell me a bit more about last night? As you know, the discussion between the siblings of how to slice up and eat the inheritance continued until late into the night. But I don't know how late it lasted. My husband and I had woken up early that morning. We were so sleepy, and a little past midnight they let us go. We then returned to the guest house and rested there. Can anyone other than Uncle Hideyoshi prove that? No, wait, it's not like I suspect you or anything, okay? Oh, are you sure about that? I don't know if it counts as proof, but when we returned to the guest house, we were greeted by Genji-san, who asked if we needed a towel. I think that should be enough to prove we returned to the guest house a little after midnight. Though, if my theory was correct, the servants would all be in cahoots, and that wouldn't actually make for much of an alibi. Hey, you've got a point there. Guess that means I'm playing detective with the real culprit right now, huh? However, let me say this for my honor's sake. If I was after the inheritance, I'd never commit such a bizarre set of murders. After all, if I just wanted to make them forfeit their rights to the inheritance, it wouldn't have mattered to me how they died. It'd be much smarter of me to try and make their deaths look like accidents. Especially if you're assuming I laid out some careful plan that involved even the servants. You've got a point there. You're killing someone for personal gain. You definitely shouldn't make it look like a murder. Yeah, make it look like a suicide, and it's like, man, what happened on this island? Everybody just suddenly killed themselves. That's pretty crazy. Exactly. That's why I'm in such a blue mood. The police will probably treat me like the mastermind and investigate all kinds of things. Not fun at all. Aunt Ava shrugged with a bitter smile. It was just as easy to suspect Aunt Ava as it was to suspect the servants. So if we spin the chessboard around, does that make it impossible for the culprit to be her, suspicious as she is? However, if that sort of argument always works, then motive can never help us in any way. No, that can't be right. Knowing the motive must give us powerful clues towards knowing the culprit. That's why murderers from all time periods disguise crimes in complicated ways, cleverly preventing their motives from being discovered. I don't get it. I just don't get it. Every time I spin the chessboard around, it keeps flipping from front to back and back to front. Are my thoughts bringing me closer to the truth? Are my thoughts bringing... Oh, wait. Or are they... Are they what, Battler? Battler, are they what? No! Aunt Ava didn't want to talk any more than that, so I folded my arms and headed to the window to cool my head a little. Sorry, I need to... Thoughts bringing closer to the truth, are they? Leading you astray? I don't... As I looked over the parlor, I saw George and Iki and the others gathered, talking. It looked like they were talking about magic, the magic circle that had been painted on the shutter. As Uncle Hideyoshi thought back to that time, he started drawing the shape in the margins of Maria's notebook. Hey, Maria will be into this. I see. Since Maria was second only to grandfather in knowledge of the occult, she might understand what it meant. I think it was probably something like that. There was a mark that looked like a variation of a cross. And then surrounding the circle around the perimeter were these closely packed strange letters on all four sides of the cross, and in the four corners there was something written. Didn't look like the alphabet or something like that. It's what they call ancient characters. And around the top of the circumference there was a small mark. 5 small circles arranged in a plus sign and straight lines connecting them. Ah, yeah. There definitely was something like that drawn there. Yep, there's no mistaking the shape. Don't understand the thin characters, but the arrangement was nearly the same. Everyone was staring down at the shape, so I stared down at it too. From what I heard, this had been painted on the shutter to the storehouse with some material that looked like blood. I'm sorry, did you guys memorize the characters? I see. This sure is unsettling. Grandfather's probably the only one who'd want to draw something this weird. Seriously, where did he go? I want to grab him and ask what the hell this is supposed to mean. Jessica's voice contained impatience and anger. She hadn't gone so far as to say grandfather was the culprit. But she seemed sure that grandfather knew something about the culprit's background. course, if you were searching for a link connecting the Ushirimiya family to the occult, 10 out of 10 people would think of grandfather. Also, to a person who knew nothing of the occult, this strange mark would have no meaning. Which meant that this might have been something addressed to grandfather. That's right, and the reason the crime was shown to the survivors was so that they'd find this. In that case, where had grandfather, the essential recipient of this message, disappear off to? Does this shape ring any bells? Maria looked at the shape with a serious face. Maybe she was enthusiastic because this was her area of expertise. However, her appearance was that of someone separated from the events at hand. As though this thing hadn't been drawn on the shutter closed around her mother's corpse. My first impression was that the design resembled a German cross. It certainly does have that kind of design. Does that mean it has something to do with Germany? Definitely. Absolutely. The German cross was originally a crest from a religious order of knights and was supposed to protect pilgrims traveling to sacred places. So in other words, this magic circle might have some religious meaning. This is starting to sound like gibberish. When I looked over at all of them, preparing to jump into the discussion, something shocked me. What, Battler? What shocked you? Maria was smiling, an eerie and incomprehensible expression on her face. It was almost as if she was making fun of everyone's ignorance. It was an expression that I wouldn't have dreamed to find on Maria's face. And she laughed. That eerie, jarring laugh was something I didn't want to believe was possible, even though I was looking at it right in front of my eyes. Maria? You people aren't even close. Can't you tell just by looking? While everyone was busy being scared out of their wits, Maria kept on cackling happily by herself. After a while, that laugh was suddenly and abruptly cut off. But her expression still looked like it belonged to someone completely different from Maria. This is the 7th magic circle of the sun. The characters are written in Hebrew. Oh. Even here. Sure. Maria stole the writing materials from the stunned Hideyoshi's hands. She then started drawing another magic circle with a rustle right next to the one Hideyoshi had drawn. See? It looks sort of like this, right? Yes, it was. Maria, incredible. She really did know a lot. Jessica tried to smooth things over by praising Maria. Maybe she wanted to confirm that this was still the Maria we all knew so well. But Maria didn't answer her in any way in particular. Maria began swiftly writing unfamiliar characters in the corners of the shape. When Uncle Hideyoshi and Dr. Nanja saw them, their eyes immediately began to open wide. Written on the top and bottom and left and right, there were the names of the angels who preside over wind, fire, earth, and water. Cheson, Aro, Borlag, and Taliahad? Oh god, I'm really bad at pronouncing things. And then the 4 corners are the names of the 4 great kings. Ariel, Seraph, Darshish, and Cherub. That what you saw? Oh, that was Maria talking. Even if they hadn't been able to correctly write what they'd seen, When they were once again shown something identical, it wasn't difficult for them to realize the two were the same. When Maria asked them whether it matched, Uncle Hideyoshi and Dr. Najo nodded over and over again. There was no mistake, that's it. I'm sure there were characters that looked like that. How are you able to write something like that? There was also characters written around the circumference. I know. Like this, right? Maria quickly began to surround the circumference with more Hebrew writing. It's from Psalms of the Old Testament, the 16th and 17th verses of the 116th Psalm. You must have at least read the Bible, right? No, I haven't. There's 116 Psalms? Acting as though knowing this was only common sense, Maria laughed. For a while, everyone, including me, was at a loss for words. A little later, George Aniki returned to his senses and slowly managed to speak. That's incredible. I'm surprised. So, what meaning does this magic circle have? It's a magic circle to borrow the power of the sun. He who wears it as a talisman drawn in gold shall be able to break free from the bonds of any prison and receive the power to gain freedom. To break free from bonds and gain freedom? It sounds deep. The word bonds is not limited in its interpretation to some kind of physical object. Therefore, it does not only hold meaning for people locked up in an actual jail. It can also refer to the release from mental bonds, such as ties of obligation and inescapable fate. Ties of obligation and inescapable fate, you say? That's also pretty deep. But I really don't understand. What does this have to do with the 6 bodies? Far from being released, they were killed and stuffed in the storehouse, weren't they? It's not like the magic circle was drawn for their sakes. The 6 of them were there for the sake of the magic circle. It truly is pitiable. What do you mean? What in the world do you mean when you say the 6 of them were there for the sake of the magic circle? Maria lifted up her pointer finger and waggled it as if she were making fun of us. That's written around the circumference. Can't you read it? Psalms chapter 116, verses 16 and 17. I'll read it for you. The Lord has freed me from my chains. I will offer to you the sacrifice of thanksgiving and will call on the name of the Lord. See? See, you say. I've got no idea what you're talking about. You're saying they're human sacrifices? If what Maria had just read aloud was a vital part of the magic circle, then it was saying that sacrifices had to be offered in order for this magic circle to be effective. The 6 chosen by the key. Come on, guys. We read the epitaph. So, human sacrifices had been offered inside the storehouse where the magic circle had been drawn. A heartbeat later, everyone else seemed to reach the same conclusion. Some people were shocked, and others spat out that this was insane as they punched to their knees. So it's starting to get incredibly disturbing, and we couldn't accept it or understand it. I don't care what kind of magic circles or curses other people believe in, I won't pick a fight with them. But did they really kill Dad and arrest the sacrifices for crap like that? I just couldn't stand that feeling. Compared to this, I preferred it when we were still disgusted by that theory about the fight over the inheritance. I started getting pissed off with a feeling between anger and sadness. I broke from the circle everyone was in and returned once again to the window. Something had gone insane since yesterday. There was that letter from the witch, Beatrice, that Maria had read aloud at last night's dinner. Ever since that point, it feels like like this whole mansion and this whole island has been getting more and more firmly locked inside of some kind of bizarre world. That's right. When I think back on it, that letter was an invitation from the witch. The ruler of the nighttime island had invited us, inhabitants of the day, into another world. phone and the radio had been interrupted and the island was shut off by the typhoon, so you really could call this place another world cut off from the real one by now. Yeah, as this island is now, it's perfectly normal for a witch to send us letters and for human sacrifices to be offered up for the sake of magic circles. So what will happen next? Will some weird people wearing goat masks start doing the Bond Festival dance or something? It's hopeless, I don't get it. The inside of my head's all screwed up and I don't even know what to think. Anger, sadness, the opposing emotions are all swirled up together and they started to suck me in. Unable to resist, I could do nothing but cover my eyes with my hands and trust to my mind and body as I started getting sucked in. As I started losing heart, I began to recall a memory from when I was small. It was from when I was very young. I had unfortunately seen a scary occult movie on TV, and for a while I hadn't even been able to go to the bathroom by myself. It happens to me every time I watch something scary before I go to bed. I get so paranoid, and then I just stay awake. It doesn't help that, I have a life-size cardboard cutout of the Formula 1 driver Kimi Räikkönen, sitting at the end of my bed. So, there was this one time when I woke up, it was maybe 3 or 4, and my room was in complete darkness because my light's broken, it doesn't work anymore. And all I could see was the shape of something in the mirror on my wall. And I'm just, laying there staring forward, and I just see something. I'm like, what is that? What am I seeing? And I genuinely, I'm sitting awake for 5 minutes, like, terrified, because who is standing right there? It was Kimi. It's Kimi Räikkönen. Chilling where I kept him for the past year and a half. But yeah, I get so paranoid when doing after watching scary things. But I like watching them. That old bastard gave an exaggerated laugh and said this. Hey, Battler. Why do you think they go to all the trouble to make movies like this about demons and the occult and such? It's because they don't exist. Something that ridiculous can't be found anywhere on the planet. Because they don't exist. People want to see them and go to a lot of effort making them. That's why those occult movies just make me laugh. If I were forced to choose, I'd say, rather than demons and monsters, this year's earnings call and angry wives are 100 million times scarier. I'll go further, okay? From my point of view, getting scared is a recreational emotion. Something for people who've got room to relax both in their hearts and their lifestyles. They had so much free time, they didn't know what to do with it. So in order to entertain their mind with unusual emotions, people started creating a culture with demons and the occult and stuff. Seriously, why have I been acting so damn thick-headed? I was totally taken in. Don't try to mess with me. This is the human world. I don't give a damn about witches, demon magic circles, and sacrifices. The human who killed Dad and everyone else is still on the island. That's all there is to it. Right? The next person who started speaking to my heart was Kiryu-san. You see, in both chess and shogi, when you reach the very, very last stage of the game and get closer and closer to cornering your opponent, the number of optimal moves you could possibly make gets smaller and smaller. Therefore, if you're backing someone against the wall, I like this song. Sounds a little like the Mission Impossible theme, but, backing someone against the wall, or if someone's doing the same to you, both players' moves become infinitely easier to read. In other words, when you're completely cornered and you think you have no moves left, that is the moment when it's easiest to reach your opponent. However, when a person is forced into a defensive position, they can't help but lose their ability to think clearly, so they aren't able to get their minds around their opponent's moves. That's when you spin the chessboard around. With all my strength, I slapped my face with both hands. Now, my eyes were truly open. When you don't understand anything and you're completely cornered just like I am now, isn't that the perfect time to spin the chessboard around? While on the defensive, we can't even guess at the culprit's scheme. If we spin it around and look at it that way, just what might we see? First off, at the time the culprit committed the murders, they knew the island was being cut off by the typhoon. Therefore, they should have understood that even if they carried out the murders, they wouldn't be able to get away early the next morning. In short, the culprit had begun without securing a way to escape. Furthermore, that bastard tossed the corpses in the storehouse, then was even kind enough to say, "Here they are," with that weird bit of graffiti. In other words, since we'd probably find the corpses sooner or later, they wanted to show them to us. If we'd all been dim and hadn't noticed the storage shed, the culprit's goal would not have been achieved, would it? If you think about it this way, that bastard of a culprit, since this morning, they must have been watching our every move with bated breath. After all, if we hadn't been so kind as to discover what was on the storehouse, all of that hard work and preparation they did last night would have just gone poof. What did the culprit want to make us feel by showing us the corpses in the storehouse? All 6 of the bodies had their faces noticeably destroyed. Was it a grudge? A warning? The defacement of the bodies had occurred after death, so it hadn't been the means by which the culprit had been killed. It didn't mean anything to those who had been killed. It did have meaning to those who found the bodies. The culprit wanted to make it appear that they had been killed so brutally. Huh. After thinking this way, I really want to tell that bastard to stop taking me so lightly. Who'd just dance to that tune if you're told, "Please be scared"? You can't just say, "Really? Sure thing." When someone tells the great Ushirimiya battler the entrance is right here, I'm the kind of guy who'll start wanting to sneak in through the window. Well, with this invigorated declaration by Battler, the great Ushirimiya battler, I think it's good enough time to end off this episode. Battler is finally gaining a little bit of intelligence. He's really putting those 2 brain cells to work right now, but I'm sure his IQ will quadruple within the next few episodes. Thanks a lot for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye!